Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. So today we are talking about the police force in the UK and having a leadership review around that. So as always, the disclaimer, this review is based solely on my own observations, my professional background and my experience as a member of the public interacting with the system. It's not legal advice and it's not an attack on any individual officers. The people on the ground are doing a really difficult job under difficult conditions. My aim is to highlight operational issues, share insights from my experience in health, well-being, safety, environment, security, and to encourage constructive improvement because policing matters and we all want it to succeed. So, good evening, good afternoon, good morning, wherever you are. So, tonight on Britain the Corporation, we're conducting a full leadership review of the police force in the UK, a division responsible for law, order, and public safety, but operating with the systems, processes, and decision making of a company that hasn't updated its operating model for decades. And I want to be clear, I grew up in the 1980s, a time when policing felt visible, local, and human. You saw officers on foot, they knew the community and you knew them. When you called, somebody turned up. So today the experience is very different, and with my background in corporate leadership, particularly around health, well-being, safety, environment and security, I'm going to analyse the police force in the same way that I would any underperforming organisation, not with emotion and not with politics, but with the operational reality. So the first section is the response times and customer experience. So let's begin with the response times. In a well-run organisation, response time is a core performance metric. It's a KPI. It's monitored, it's reviewed and it's improved. At the police force, the response time is aspirational. Crimes reported, logs are created and then silence. If this were a business, customers would be demanding refunds. But in Britain, the corporation, the customer simply gets a reference number. And here's the uncomfortable truth. Many people no longer expect the police to turn up. Not because they don't care, but because they've learned to expect it. And the perception of two-tier policing. This is a public perception in many areas. There's a growing belief in two-tier policing. Tier 1 is your high-profile, politically sensitive or reputational risk incidents where resources appear instantly. And Tier 2 is just everything else. Burglaries, vandalism, theft, antisocial behaviour, where the response is often a polite email saying we're closing this case due to lack of evidence. If this were a corporation, this would be called selective service delivery. In reality, it's a leadership and prioritisation problem. And the auditor phenomenon, there's a modern spectacle of policing, the camera auditor. A member of the public stands outside a police station with a camera and suddenly the police force finds unlimited staffing. Officers appear from every doorway, supervisors arrive and a full-scale operation quickly unfolds. Meanwhile, someone reporting a burglary can't get a single officer to attend. If this were a business, the board would be asking, why are we over-resourcing the low-risk incidents and under-resourcing the high-impact ones? It's not a policing problem, it's a prioritisation problem. And prioritisation is leadership. So how it used to be when I was young in the 80s, policing felt really different. You saw officers on foot, they knew the community, there was visibility, familiarity and trust. Today policing feels distant and reactive, transactional. If this were a corporation, the customer engagement strategy would be marked as obsolete. So the staffing, well-being and safety. Now, talking about the workforce, police officers are under enormous pressure, long shifts, high stress, trauma exposure, and a constant expectation to be everything to everyone. In any other organisation, the well-being would be a strategic priority. At the police force, well-being is something discussed probably after burnout has already happened. Safety is reactive, training is inconsistent, and officers are often sent into volatile situations with limited support. If this were a corporation, the health and safety audit would be absolutely shocking. And the visibility of traffic officers. So let's talk about road policing. Once upon a time when officers were everywhere, visible, present, preventative, They're almost mythical nowadays. You're more likely to see a unicorn than a traffic unit. And the result is predictable. Standards slip, driving behaviour worsens, and enforcement becomes reactive instead of preventative. If this were a corporation, the board would be asking, why has an entire department become invisible? And ego-driven policing. Now, something uncomfortable but important. In any organisation, ego is a risk factor. In policing, it can be operationally dangerous. Too often, interactions escalate not because of law, but because of pride. Officers are human, but ego cannot be a leadership strategy, and it cannot take priority over professionalism, de-escalation and public trust. If this were a corporation, ego-driven decision-making would be flagged as a cultural failure. And the favourite offences. Now, there's a small repertoire, a set of offences that seem to be reached for, like the greatest hits. Obstruction, public order, failing to provide details, breach of the peace. It's the policing equivalent of a band that only knows 4 songs. If this were a corporation, the board would be asking, why is their enforcement strategy limited to a handful of familiar tools? Where's the training? Where's the consistency? Where is the proportionality? And the process design and case handling. In a well-run organisation, cases flow through a clear, predictable system. At the police force, the process resembles a maze. Reports go in, updates disappear, cases stall, and victims are left refreshing their inboxes like they're waiting for a parcel. If this were a business, the COO would be asking why the customer journey looks like a flowchart drawn by a committee. And technology and systems. Any modern organisation, technology supports the workforce, it reduces friction, it speeds up decision making. At the police force, technology is likely a patchwork of legacy systems held together with hope and some duct tape. Do officers spend more time typing than policing? Do the systems talk to each other? If this were a corporation, the CIO would be explaining why the organisation is still running on digital fossils and public safety, the environment and security. So police stations are closing, security perimeters appear to be inconsistent, and environmental controls seem to be outdated. In any organisations, there will be red flag risks. Here, they look to be simply accepted and the way things are, but they don't have to be. Fixable issues with leadership, investment and accountability, and risk management and prioritisation. In a well-run organisation, risk is assessed and prioritised. At the police force, risk is often managed by tradition rather than data. High-impact crimes receive low-impact responses. Low-impact incidents receive disproportionate attention. If this were a corporation, the risk register would be glowing red. So what would a well-run company do? A real competent organisation would redesign the customer journey, modernise the systems. It would invest in staff well-being. It would prioritise based on the impact, not the optics. It would rebuild community engagement and would measure performance and then act on it. In other words, it would behave like a business that really wants to survive. So imagine the future, a police force with clear priorities, modern systems, visible officers, a supported workforce, a culture of safety and a leadership team that actually listens. It just doesn't seem to be happening. So in summary, the police force is not failing because of the people, it's surviving because of them. If Britain, the corporation, were a real business, the leadership team will be reviewing processes, rebuilding systems and investing in that workforce. Instead, the organisation continues to function despite the structure, not because of it. And that is just one division, one department and one example of what happens when a country is run with the operational discipline of a badly organised filing cabinet. So here's what I want to do next. So I want to review more departments in Britain, the corporation: transport, education, housing, local councils, any part of this country that would never survive if it had to operate like a real well-run organisation. So if there's a department, a service or a public system you want me to review next, leave it in the comments. Please tell me where you want the spotlight to go, because if this country were really a business, someone would be asking the tougher questions and on this channel we will. So thank you for watching and welcome to Britain the Corporation. Thank you.